Mascot horror is a genre that exists. A whole year later, this discussion topic continues to be one of the most heavily debated subjects in the online horror sphere. The general consensus being that anyone can make some colorly blob and give it sharp teeth and it becomes a marketable merch icon overnight. And I don't blame a lot of people for having the sentiment, as it seems to be getting proven again and again and again. And I mean, yeah, there's not much of a reason as to why something like Garden of Banban should realistically have the popularity that it does, which I believe is a big reason as to why people think this way. But is it really true? Can you just copy something that has come before you every time with guaranteed success in this field? It might actually be a little bit more nuanced than that. Shocker, I know. With how massive this type of media has become, there is inevitably an ocean of mascot horror games that just did not catch on. Whether that reason being the quality of the game was so abysmal people couldn't even pretend to like it, the game being a first attempt that would later catch on through another project, or maybe one that was simply just not at the right place at the right time. Whether the reason may be, these mascot horror games were shunned for one reason or another from becoming the next big game in the genre. And I think I've narrowed down the three most interesting cases of this phenomenon: Hide Time, Leanie Boog, and the elusive Egghead Gumpty. With one of these games being such a copy of an existing game that the title is even mimicked, and one of them being made by the same minds that brought us Garden of Banban, I think we got something that'll at least be a little bit interesting on our hands. So, without further ado, let's get the ball rolling with Hide Time, the first rejected mascot horror game on our list. You know, my expectations were low, but come on, you didn't even try. Hide Time is the first game on our list, and it's certainly the most egregious too. To say Hide Time wears its inspirations on its sleeve, I think would be a little bit of an understatement. Now, ever since Poppy Playtime, every mascot horror game of this vein seems to need some sort of gimmick that's thrown aggressively in your face. Poppy obviously had the grab pack, Rainbow Friends had the portable hiding spot thing, and Garden of Banban had the drone. What gimmick does this game have? It's a syringe. The gimmick of this game is a syringe. You need to extract green goo from the green goo dispenser and use it to power the doors in the facility. It is such a bizarre way of going around things, and is also somehow by far the worst mascot horror gimmick I have had the displeasure of using so far. I honestly thought it couldn't get worse than the slow, unresponsive Garden of Banban drone, but all you do with this is just slowly grab a substance and bring it from point A to point B, sometimes needing to do it upwards to 3 times in a row. You can argue that none of these mascot horror gimmicks serve any sort of intrinsic purpose, but at the very least, when done right, these tools can have a neat visual spectacle for the player to look at. Hide Time Syringe just serves as a mindless padding mechanism for the sake of dragging out the already extremely short runtime of this game. Hide Time also has some of the worst visuals out of any mascot horror game I've played so far. And I'm not even talking about the textures or the lighting or anything like that, although those are still pretty bad. I'm talking more about the actual camera itself. This game is dark. Like, so dark that you can't even see in some areas. I learned this is because for some reason, your brightness is turned all the way down by default. I can only assume that this was done as an attempt to make the game look more spooky, but all it did was serve to annoy me to no end. Especially later in the game, where you're expected to do precision platforming in the borderline pitch black. The darkness isn't where the visual problems end though. Your character's actual vision is super blurry to the point where you can't even make out what's 8 feet in front of you. On top of an incredibly nauseating view bob and a really aggressive motion blur, you might genuinely feel sick after playing this game. There's also this weird disorienting bug that happens where your mouse will just go crazy and send you nowhere near the direction that you want to go, making the majority of my deaths while playing this game not my fault, which is one of the worst things you can have happen to your player while playing a game. So, we have an underwhelming gimmick, a nauseating camera, but is the monster at least good? No, it's not. I don't know what the name of this guy is, but from a note I found earlier, it mentions a character called DJ Cat, so I'm going to assume that's what this is. DJ Cat doesn't even try to set itself apart from its very clear inspirations, and it's just really sad to witness. We don't even see this guy until the very end of the game, but we are teased him when we do a combat section in this game. And yes, this is one of the very few mascot horror games with actual combat in it. What an honor. Somehow the combat is also worse than the original Bendy and the Ink Machine's combat as well. You fight with this pipe wrench thing, and you need to kill these little bug dudes with some of the most clunky and unresponsive hitboxes you'll ever see. It's a very out-of-nowhere inclusion, and it's the only time you're given a health bar in the game too, which is interesting, I guess. Anyways, we do eventually make it to the final chase scene, and it definitely ranks as one of the lowest out of any Mascot Horror chase scene I have played. I mean, unlike Rainbow Friends, we can at least see the monster as it chases us, but a part of me wishes we didn't. The monster has no sort of interesting animation at all, and it just keeps the same friendly facial expression as it would normally. This just makes the scene not interesting or memorable in any way, and just serves as another watered-down feeling imitation of the pop event chase. Eventually, we do get to the end, though, and I'll just let this cutscene speak for itself.
This is the best part.
Water park is when the big gingerbread mascot pisses me.
There it goes.
I forgot about that.
And that's where the game ends. I'm honestly glad we played this one first, because surely it won't get any worse than this. I don't even know how I still end up finding games like this that surprise me with how low quality they are, but this is just getting out of hand at this point. If I were to give Hide Time anything, though, is that it's at least free. But with a Hide Time Chapter 2 being confirmed literally days before I started writing the script, I feel like that's not going to be the case for future installments. As it stands, I don't think you can make more of a shameless imitation without entering into borderline copyright infringement. If there's one intrinsic quality I can say about the game, though, is that its environments are okay looking, but that just might be because I am barely able to see them in general. But hey, at least they look like they might have more care put into them than something like Garden of Banban. Is that high praise? No, not at all, but it's an observation. Surely things can't get any worse than this, though. So let's continue forward and see what our other two contenders will bring to the table. You know, I wanted to like this one. I really did. But Leanie Boog is a game that feels like it has a good foundation, but ultimately still falls apart as everything else in the game seemingly tries to work against it. I really like the concept attached to this one, having to rely on audio cues to ensure your survival while progressing through the night. Or at least that was the general summary I was given before I jumped into it. The game actually starts with this interactive cutscene, which serves to introduce the character Leanie Boog to us. It's fine. The VHS effect was kind of annoying since instead of looking like a VHS tape, it just blurred my vision and added an annoying filter to everything. But it doesn't overstay its welcome, and we are put into the actual meat of the game pretty quickly. Getting into it, this tutorial box gives us a rundown of this level's mechanics. As mentioned previously, audio plays a huge part in your survival for this game, with Night 1 requiring you to run all around this house environment to closed windows that Leanie will be stalking you from. The way to determine which window Leanie is at is to listen out for an audio cue of him running around outside. If you hear shuffling predominantly on your right ear, check the right side of the house and vice versa. If you fail to get to the correct spot Leanie is peeking out of on time, you get jump scared. Does this sound familiar yet? Relying on dynamic audio to know where to look is usually a pretty neat mechanic in horror games. One of the most notable examples of something like this, and this game's pretty clear inspiration, being Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Now, despite this game feeling very similar to FNAF 4's utilization of audio, I believe the execution in Leanie Boog misses the mark that something like FNAF 4 was able to hit. Even when listening very closely, a lot of the times it was very hard to tell where Leanie actually was. This caused a lot of deaths for me in the beginning, but this might have honestly been intentional. Leanie Boog is ultimately a fairly short game, so I wouldn't be surprised if trial and error was something that the developers intentionally wanted you to be challenged with. And hey, eventually I got the hang of it too, so it might have just taken a little bit of adjusting to how the game works. Despite all of this though, I gotta admit I'm still under the opinion that the gameplay of this section just got really monotonous halfway through. A big part as to why I believe this section of the game fails in comparison to its contemporaries like FNAF 4 is that there's just not really much variety. In FNAF 4, there were several areas where a given animatronic could attack, having you manage 4 established blind spots at a time with varying ways to defend yourself from your foes. Boiled down, these mechanics are all pretty similar to one another, but just some minor tweaks and a contrast in cosmetics has you not really think about that when engaging in the night-to-night gameplay, resulting in a fairly satisfying, repeatable loop that can really test not only your ears, but also your reflexes too. I bring all of this up to hammer in the fact that this first level of Leanie Boog lacks all of those core details that makes other audio-reliant horror like FNAF 4 work so well. Here, all you really have to do is just dart side to side looking for the correct window Leanie is peeking through with no advancement to the gameplay. Occasionally, a unique audio cue will play to alert that he's now peeking out of one of the windows upstairs, but it still runs into the problem of just being more windows. There's no other thing to manage on this night, which I think works as a detriment to making this game not feel incredibly monotonous. It could be literally anything other than the window too. Maybe have Leanie occasionally break inside and you need to listen for if he's in a closet and possibly either scare him off with a flashlight or keep the closet door closed for an amount of time. Really just anything more than keeping the window shut. Another thing to note is that I don't think his AI gets progressively harder as the clock ticks down either, because as soon as the night starts, he is consistently pretty damn active even on easier difficulties, meaning at least that this game can be challenging, but it doesn't really require much thinking to win. Overall, the first section of this game isn't offensively bad, but it makes for a pretty meh experience. I beat it in a manner I thought was pretty timely enough, so at least it didn't overstay its welcome. Actually, if I were to give this part of the game any sort of compliment, it's that I was pretty anxious when I got far into the night because death becomes a lot more scary the closer you are to completion. But this also just might be because I really didn't want to replay the entire section all over again, so this might be more of a backhanded compliment now that I think about it. But you'd be fooled to think that this is all the game has to offer, as we have a whopping whole 2 more nights to cover now. And fortunately enough, I think Night 2 is a pretty big step up from the first one. We're given some more pre-night exposition, and if I were to give this game any other compliment, it's that the story seems to be pretty easy to follow too. All it really comes down to is that Leanie Boog is some occult figure that was summoned and is now going around killing people, and you have to stop him. I believe we're supposed to be playing as a cop or a detective or something in this game too, but in some areas, the scaling of our surroundings is really off. Like, this table comes up to my chest, it looks like. It kinda reminds me of the scaling in Security Breach now that I think about it. Anyways, yeah, Night 2. This night evolves on the mechanics of the last one in ways that I like, but also kinda dislike. It is for sure a lot more enjoyable and unique than Night 1. The core mechanic of this one being that one of these doors on the side will have a light show up, indicating that you must enter that room. When you do, you need to listen out for if Leanie will be attacking from the door or the window. If he's attacking from the door, you simply just need to keep the door closed until he starts running around again. But if he attacks from the window, you have to catch him attempting to enter and leave through the door to repeat the cycle until time runs out. This is without a doubt the best level in the game. It puts you into a pretty engaging rhythm that you need to pay attention to in order to survive. But without a doubt, the biggest thing to drag this section down is the goddamn QTEs. So when you gotta leave the room or close the door, your first reaction would probably be to interact at the door with the E key, as from this point, it has been the universal interaction key for the entire game. But for some reason, the game decides to switch up the prompt to a different key on random, and they barely explain this in the tutorial. On my end, this led to so many confused deaths with my first attempts at doing this, and even when I thought I had it, I still couldn't properly gauge how much time I actually had to exit the room or close the door, leading to even more of an issue with the learning curve. I think if they were going to switch up the order of which key will show up, they should have done a better job at presenting that than just telling you to press whatever key appears on the screen. When doing later attempts though, it's very clear that the time they give you to actually process what key it's prompting you to press is actually pretty generous. And you could get out of the situation fairly easily when finding that out. At least on easy mode. I'm not sure about the other difficulties because I did not want to judge the intricate shifts in gameplay depending on the difficulties in fucking Leanie Boog. Overall, this night was a pretty big step up from the first, but it still wasn't the most entertaining thing in the world. But hey, we have one more level that can possibly turn everything around, so let's get to it. No, it does not turn it around. Actually, I believe that the third level of Leanie Boog completely destroys everything this game was building up from this point, turning the gameplay from this test of hearing and endurance to a generic find some things and escape horror game. You gotta go around this facility and turn on 4 generators to escape, which gets rid of the timer from previous nights. While you go around, you need to watch out for Leanie running towards you. If he does, you need to pull out this goddamn Goliath of a flashlight and flash him until he runs away. This is the worst flashlight I have ever used in a video game. I didn't even know it was possible to mess up something as simple as that, but they somehow managed to do it. When Leanie runs at you, you can't just shine the light at him and expect him to run away immediately. He'll try to resist it at first, and when he's in this state, he can still kill you, so you don't want to be that close to him. This, on top of the fact that you need to hold the flashlight button down with a long-ass winding time, while trying to also hold down shift to run and navigate backwards in a super claustrophobic space. This absolutely ruins any sort of positive feelings I had for this game. Everything in here seems like it was so overlooked and lazily put together that it sours even the littlest of positives I gave the game previously. I was stuck on here for so long because everything felt like it was against my favor, and not in the fun way, just in the poorly designed and broken way. Another thing, remember how this game's entire gimmick so far relied on audio primarily? Well, audio is barely even a concern here. You can kinda hear Leanie faintly spawn in if you listen close enough, but half the time you'll probably just see him before you hear him. But the biggest gripe I have with the audio system in this level is that for every lever you pull, the music track in the back becomes louder, to the point where the music overpowers literally everything else in a game all about trying to hear audio.
Why? That's the joke.
Like a fucking clown.
Why did they think this was a good idea? They kinda did something similar to this before the night ended in the first two levels, but it was for less than 10 seconds, so you were very likely not going to die when that sting kicked in. But here, it lasts until you waddle your way to the exit, making it borderline impossible to hear the already faint sound of Leanie spawning in. But eventually we do make it out of the facility and we're given the ending. Leanie talks to us for a little bit, and I don't really care. And we have to make a choice on whether we want to go with him or walk away. I decide to walk away because I hate this guy, and then on the other side we see this guy. I don't know, man, you can't pay me to pay attention to the lore of this. But after completing this one, I can certainly say that it's also deserving of its scarce notoriety. The setup and overall presentation of this one is definitely the best you're going to see in this entire video, there's no doubt about that. But despite that, the gameplay doesn't even attempt to save itself as it goes on. After beating the game, we can unlock different skins to put on Leanie for replay runs. I don't really have anything to say about these other than this one looks a lot like Leon Kennedy. Oh yeah, this game also runs almost as bad as Spectator, meaning that once again, I almost burnt my entire house down playing this game. Well, what are we waiting for now? We got one more game on the list, and I think I've been saving the best for last. It's time to play Egghead Gumpty. Man, that's really all I gotta say about this one. Just... man. Egghead Gumpty. Egghead frickin' Gumpty. To know why this game in particular is so interesting to me, because as mentioned previously, this game was brought to us by developers Ferris and Geppo, aka the Euphoric Brothers, aka the creators of Garten of Banban. I don't think many people know that these two actually created a Mascot Horror game before Banban, and I still don't think many people have even made the connection yet. Searching for Egghead Gumpty on YouTube shows that the game got very moderate traction from prominent Let's Players, but absolutely nowhere near the same heights as Banban was able to reach. So it makes me curious, what were the Euphoric Brothers capable of doing before they got their big break? The answer seems to be a lot more than what they showed off in their later catalog. Now, I'm gonna try to set this game aside from the Banban games as much as I can in my review of this, mainly because the scope and vision between what the brothers made here and what they would go on to make feels like completely different moments in the brothers' time as developers. Although still being a Mascot Horror game, with the mascot being an egg, this game plays completely differently from what they'd go on to make, taking place in what is said to be a procedurally generated juvenile detention center, occupied by none other than Egghead Gumpty. First off, procedural generation is something on paper that sounds fairly interesting, on top of being advertised as infinite procedural generation. This is false advertising. The juvie we explore in the game, although seeming to actually be randomly generated every single time, is far from infinite. Actually, they are so shameless with the borders of the map that if you go too far in one direction, you will literally just see where the room is cut off by a black void. I have no idea why they would advertise this game under the pretense of it being infinitely generated, because this game would be an absolute nightmare to navigate if it really was. A juvenile detention center actually sounds like it would be a pretty cool setting for a game like this too, especially a Mascot Horror game. But they do absolutely nothing with the concept. You just go around the same looking rooms endlessly with random objects thrown into them. Like, why is there a toilet here? Why can I move it? But enough of the environment for now, we can come back to it. I keep saying this game plays a lot differently to what we're used to from these devs, but just how so? The goal of this game is to go around looking for 10 keys to put into this one door to escape. Keys are only kept in light blue gift boxes that can be pretty hard to find depending on your seed. There's other gift boxes too, such as green ones that give you more battery for your flashlight and black boxes for lockpicks. Oh yeah, I think I should also explain that. You're given lockpicks that you can use to silently open up doors that otherwise you have to barge in forcefully, which alerts enemies to your position. Presumably, at least. I didn't really notice a change in them spawning more than they regularly do after just barging in. You could also spend one of the keys you found to open these doors too, which is an absolutely idiotic idea because if you do it too much, you will most likely softlock your game as you won't have enough keys to end the level. While you go around trying to collect keys, you'll be faced by two threats: Gumpty, who attacks from the walls and sometimes just flat out chases you, and this red guy. Now, the core mechanic given to you that determines your survival in this game is the alt fire you can do with the flashlight, which turns the light red. Shining red light at the face of the red guy and at Gumpty when they're in the walls is what gets rid of these threats momentarily. With the red guy, you gotta alternate between your red light and your normal light depending on what his eye color changes to. You know you're done with the sequence when he disintegrates. Moving on to Gumpty. Oh God, Gumpty himself is a completely different can of worms. When he's in this tentacle form and chases you around, he's actually not that bad. You just gotta outrun him until he despawns, and you're noticeably faster than him, so the only way you could die during this is if you get cornered. But the one I have a problem with is when he hides behind the walls, because I swear to God, he literally just does not spawn in sometimes. Because of this environment always being randomly generated, having one of your enemy's gimmicks being hidden in the geometry of the level doesn't sound like the smartest thing to implement into a game, especially as amateur devs. This has led to a lot of deaths where no matter where I looked, finding Gumpty seemed almost impossible, and killed several of my runs. This game wouldn't even be that hard if it wasn't for this. But because of the poor implementation of this mechanic, it led to almost 3 whole hours of playtime for me in this game. This one little thing made what possibly would have been a 30-minute experience stretch out to more than quadruple the amount of that time. Peak game design. Oh yeah, there's also this cat that follows you around too, I guess. It doesn't do anything from what I know. He's just there. And that's really all there is to this game. There's some other special boxes that you can collect, like these ones that give you lore logs, and some others that can give you certain buffs to make the game a bit easier too. But other than that, all you gotta do now is just find all 10 keys and open the exit door. After doing so, you're greeted with this girl. I honestly paid no attention to what she was saying at all, other than apparently we will be sent to the 2nd floor of the facility in Chapter 2, which obviously never manifested because, well, I think you could figure out why. This game is so hastily put together and arguably lies to you in its store page as well. It's no surprise that we would get what we did from the fallout of this game's existence. And although I believe the premise of this one could be interesting, they do absolutely nothing with it and just made environments that feel like weird alien spaces with random objects thrown in there rather than something actually worth exploring or even just looking at. Will Egghead Gumpty ever return? With how lucrative and popular Garden of Banban has gotten, probably not. But who knows? Maybe bro's got a little Javanium in him. I've played a lot of Mascot Horror games at this point, more than I'd probably want to admit, and hearing about these ones paraded in passing as infamous legends for the last couple of months has really perked up my interest in this genre's lesser successes. Did any of these games deserve more than what they seem to have gotten? Probably not, but definitely a pretty big varying degree of probably not. While Leanie Boog was fine, it certainly wasn't anything to write home about, and also degraded in quality further as it went on. Egghead Gumpty felt like it was something meant to just cash in on a trend, but ended up missing the mark. But oh, did it come back with a vengeance. And Hide Time? Yeah, I think this one is more than deserving of its reputation. Living in a post-FNAF world has definitely brought a ton of strange media to star in the limelight, but I guess sometimes even this genre can have limits, as it was certainly shown here. I'm gonna go steal the source code of Garden of Banban 4 or something now. I'll talk to you all later. I've been Dags, and until next time, see ya.